Okay, that's fine. That's fine? Okay. Okay. So, one of the problems is that we all, no matter how reasonable we might be, are subject to biases and errors and pitfalls in our reasoning that we usually don't recognize. It's not a matter of being smart. It happens to all of us. It's the way our brains work. One of the common ones is known as the confirmation bias. What that refers to is the notion that we unconsciously seek out information that supports what we want to be true, what we think to be true. And as a result, we tend to ignore things that might compromise that belief. There's a real problem with police investigations. One of the best examples of this is what happened to Guy Paul Morin. You may remember him. He was wrongly sentenced to prison term, eventually was released when there was new information available. But what happened? This was a Newmarket or Orangeville. A little girl, a neighbor of Guy Paul Morin's, had been murdered. Well, they didn't know that at the time. She'd gone missing. Police came around, they organized a search party. Guy Paul Morin said, I don't want to go. I'd be afraid of she was my neighbor. She was a lovely kid. I'd be terrified of finding her dead. Police said, aha, that's guilt. And he quickly became the number one suspect. And so when they eventually found the body, right next to it was a cigarette butt. And they said, well, Guy Paul Morin doesn't smoke, so that's irrelevant. And they ignored it. And they ignored other things, which led to his conviction. So that was an example of a confirmation bias. It's easy for all of us to fall into this in our everyday lives. Not something new. This is Francis Bacon back in the 1600s. The human understanding, when it has once adopted an opinion, draws all things else to support and agree it. And though there be a greater number and weight of instances to be found on the other side, yet these it either neglects and despises, or else by some distinction sets aside and rejects. That's the confirmation bias. We are all prone to this. Some of our beliefs, we think we're being reasonable, but we get down with it. We're just dealing with labels. So, for instance, if someone says, why did the apples fall from the tree? It was like gravity. Well, how do you know it's gravity? Well, because the apple fell from the tree. It's just circular reasoning. But it satisfies. Oh, yeah, I believe I know. I understand. But we don't. What is gravity? Well, it's a very complicated thing. We all have a gravitational field. Every one of us. Any bit of mass has gravity. You attract the earth towards you, it attracts you towards it. It's a lot bigger than you are, so there's a lot more gravitational force. We attract each other gravitationally. Minuscule force, but it's there. And so, what is it? What is it? Well, various explanations are offered over the years. Aristotle said it's because bodies like to move towards a natural place, and the natural place is the center of the earth, which is also, he thought, the center of the universe. Oh, okay, that explains it. Just nature. Along comes Isaac Newton. He conceived the notion of a force that could be described mathematically. He came up with a very precise mathematical description, which would yield the gravitational force between any two objects based on the product of their masses and inversely proportional distance between them. Works very well. Works very well for things we encounter in everyday life. It tends to fall apart when you get into the cosmos, and this is where Einstein's law of general relativity came about. Einstein said gravity is not a force. He said that, in fact, results from the curvature of space-time due to the uneven distribution of mass energy. Well, if you ask why the apple fell from the tree, and someone gives you that answer. So most of us are content with the label, and it seems to explain. Well, then what about this? This is a picture of the International Space Station. So if I were to ask you, why is it floating? What would you say? That's what most people say. If you say no gravity, then I'd ask you, how come the space station keeps going around the Earth? Why doesn't it hurtle into outer space?
It's going at the right speed.
The fact is that what we're using is a label again. It seems to make sense to the world, given that we don't really understand what we mean by gravity. So the gravity of the space station is actually 90% of what it is on Earth. But So this man is actually in free fall, but just think of swinging a pail of water around your head, something analogous to that. The space station is traveling so fast, 17,500 miles an hour, that he never hits the bottom. So he's falling, but the space station is going around the Earth, and he just never reaches the bottom of the space station. But he is in free fall. It's not because there's no gravity. So reason can be thrown off by all sorts of things. Belief and emotion. Well, we all know that our emotions can interfere with our reasoning. And sometimes our heads produce opposite responses to what our hearts suggest, and often hearts have a way of winning over heads. And so this leads to another bias that's referred to as motivated cognition. That is, when people are faced with ambiguous evidence, it is shown that they try to come to an interpretation that's consistent with what they want to be true. So this is a little bit different from confirmation bias. That involves seeking out evidence. The motivated cognition is a matter of interpreting ambiguous evidence. Take out my jacket. It's getting kind of warm up here.
Do you believe that, or is that just...
Yeah. Right. So I'm talking about belief and experience now, because experience is a great teacher, obviously. But we can also have beliefs that are reinforced by experience that may or may not be true. So if you have a wart on your thumb and you pray for it to go away and it goes away, that may be for you evidence that God exists and answers your prayer. It may have gone away anyway. But nonetheless, if you have that belief in God, it will be strengthened by this kind of experience. Similarly, beliefs in ESP or the effectiveness of snake oil medicines or racism and sexism. You have a racist or sexist beliefs, you may well interpret things that go on around you as evidence that supports your belief. You will say, well, in my experience, and come out with something that is quite bigoted. Of course, no one ever says, by the way, I'm a bigot, but I'm not a bigot, but. So many beliefs reinforced. I want to mention a little bit about a belief that's reinforced. George mentioned this group, Psychop. I can, after my talk a bit more about that. But a group of skeptics. We were invited back in the 80s to go to China and test some young girls who apparently could read with their armpits. So someone would write Chinese words on a piece of paper they put their armpits, or sometimes they would sit on. And they would apparently read them. While we were there, by the way, it turns out they didn't read, they actually cheated. But this man, let me go back for a second. We also observed a Qigong master. Now, Qigong is an ancient Indian system involving invisible energy that can be used for all sorts of things. It's the basis, for example, of Tai Chi. So Qigong, Qi is the energy, Gung is the application of it. What you're going to see is a Qigong master, and on the gurney, you'll see a woman on her stomach. It was explained to us that this woman has some very serious back problems. She can hardly move. She's been treated by Western medicine without success. And now after undergoing a few treatments with Qigong, she's able to ride around. And I'll just show you, I only have a small clip here to show you, but this went on for probably half an hour. She did all kinds of things. She almost stood in her head, not quite. But she gyrated and she bent and she twisted. And clearly it was a sign that she was in pretty good shape. And so why wouldn't people who saw this say, well, the Qigong master, Western medicine couldn't do it, the Qigong master couldn't do it. So here he is at work. And this is just a video that one of my colleagues made. So there he is doing his stuff, and there she is shaking around. And if you were to watch more of this video than I have here, you see that every now and then he changes his motions. And when that happens, she changes, or so it seems, she changes her motion. And it really seems like he's the puppet master. She can't see him, so what's going on? Well, we watched carefully and we videotaped it, and we discovered what was going on. She was changing before he did. She was reading the dance. And I'm almost certain, in no way of being absolutely certain, that neither he nor her were cheating. They had developed this belief in it. She had learned that they pat her in the back and say, that's great, when she does her gyrations, and she didn't know what else to do except every now and then change. And he would slightly change his action. And I don't have time to go into it right now, but through the translator talked to him at some length. I'm quite sure he really believed that he was causing her to move. So there's another example of how experience can reinforce a belief, even if the belief is quite false. And then there's epiphany. We all know the story of Saul on the road to Damascus. But one of the things I point out is even skeptics can be vulnerable. People who don't believe in ghosts and poo-poo ghosts can, if the situation is such, sometimes suddenly have a conversion, or they become convinced of ghosts. I knew one person who was a dyed-below skeptic who did not believe in life after death. His son was tragically killed. And the next time I saw this person, he was telling me that he was getting telephone calls from his dead son. He now knew that psychic energy was real, there was a life after death, and he was not going to be challenged on that. And of course, who would do that? But it was an epiphany for him. And as I've often thought, no one has a conversion experience to skepticism. Okay. Society obviously also influences our beliefs, and perhaps more so than we sometimes realize. Our perceptions, interpretations of things around us are determined in part by how other people react. And so if we lived centuries ago when the witchcraft epidemic was in full swing, when everyone around us was talking about witches having poisoned their wells or killed their cattle or deformed their babies, it'd probably be very easy for us to come to share that belief. And if we didn't, we might well, this used to happen, might well be condemned as a witch ourselves. So the social environment has a huge influence, and deviating from the accepted belief of the group can be dangerous. And this is referred to by psychologists as cultural cognition. In order to maintain ties to other individuals, we tend to hold beliefs shared by our groups. A relatively recent study had to do with belief in climate change. This is done in the United States, 2012, over 1,500 adults from across the United States. Some were from oil-producing states such as Texas. Some were from environmentally friendly states such as Washington and Vermont. The researchers had two notions that might explain a reluctance to accept that global warming is a real threat. First one was that it's lack of scientific understanding. It's lack of knowledge. The second one was that it's because people form their perceptions of risk in line with the values of the groups to which they belong and which they identify. And so their study produced no results for the first, compelling results for the second, and they concluded that greater science literacy, greater knowledge of arithmetic, not associated with increase in the perceived seriousness of climate change. Rather, the best educated, best scientifically informed groups were the ones that showed the greatest cultural polarization. If they lived in Texas, in the oil belt, they used their scientific knowledge to poo-poo the global warming notion. If they lived in Vermont, they used their scientific knowledge to say, of course, there is global warming. And again, we can see the notions of motivated cognition here. And we know if we're trying to have a conversation with someone who disagrees with us, people have different personalities. And some people can be, for example, very dogmatic. Dogmatic people have a personality where they don't want to hear competing ideas. They want to close themselves off and maintain a rigid acceptance of their own beliefs and confidence in them. And they also tend to be intolerant, pessimistic, anxious, defer to authority. And essentially, they discredit any information that they don't like. And so if you're dealing with someone with that kind of personality, you're going to have a very hard time breaching the armor. It's very likely that you'll succeed. Okay, now, I want to talk about belief and the brain. And this instance, I'm going to talk particularly about belief in the supernatural. Whether it's belief in God or ESP or ghosts or whatever. Our brains are set up to make this belief almost automatic. And it's not because of some plan that Mother Nature had for us. It's due to the way we process information. So I want to go through a few points on this. First of all, we're born as what I would call magical figures. That is, we tend to see, at least as children, and this carries into adulthood sometimes as well, two things that are put closely together in time as having a causal relationship. One causes the other. Our brains are set up to learn that way. We learn that if I hit this and the lights go off, we'll all automatically say, what must have knocked a switch? Right? We make these associations automatically. We can't help it. Our brains are set up that way. We can question those associations later. But if B follows A, it seems that B was caused by A. So the infant is born with that predilection. And will learn about things that really are causal related, and will think that other things are causal related that have no connection at all. Also, infants early in life automatically come to distinguish between animate and inanimate. They come very quickly realize that objects don't have the ability to move on their own. Objects don't have the ability to think. Objects don't have the ability to interact as people and animals do. And so by 5 months of age, there are actual separate cognitive systems that are built up in the brain to deal with animate and inanimate. Well, what's important about that is that leads to what's known as theory of mind. The young child is 5, 6, 7 months old, starts to realize that what's going on in her head or his head, probably other people have that kind of process going on in their brains as well. That's what psychologists call theory of mind. And that's a huge intellectual step to suddenly realize that, those people, they're all like I am. They have these abilities to think and reason and plan. And so they attribute this first to animate beings, including animals. And this leads directly to the notion of mind being separate from body. Mind-body dualism. Objects don't have minds. Animate beings do. And of course, one step beyond that, then, if minds are separate from the body, maybe there are minds out there that don't have bodies. Ghosts or demons or gods makes perfect sense. And of course, society will fill in the blanks to tell children what those discarnate beings are. Theory of mind, hope your eyes don't glaze over as I go through this, but theory of mind leads to agency protection. What I mean by that is that we are automatically programmed to look for causes that might harm us, dangerous agents that might cause us some harm. And so whenever you take an infant who's suddenly frightened, the infant will spontaneously, after 5 or 6 or 7 months, look around as to, why am I feeling that way? What's causing it? Who's causing it? And similarly, if there's a pattern, a strange pattern, infants and adults do this as well. Well, someone must have done that. That couldn't have just on its own. It's a pattern. And of course, for a child, at a certain age, a ball rolls into the room. The child is young enough, doesn't even ask where the ball comes from. A little bit older, the child says, where did that ball come from? Did the dog kick it? Did my mom kick it? There had to be an agent behind it. And if we can't see the agent, then it's easy to think that the agent is imperceptible. Again, that feeds the notion of discarnate beings, minds, souls without bodies. Promiscuous, psychologists call this a funny term lately. Promiscuous teleological intuition. This promiscuous doesn't mean anything to do with being licentious or sexual. It means simply that widespread. Teleological means oriented towards a goal. So here the notion is that the child is innately prone to assume that things exist for a reason. People exist for a reason. I remember when my son was, 4 or 5 years old, we were walking through one of the ravines in Toronto. And I pointed to some shrubbery, which I'd been told the deer like to eat. It had big heads of, I don't even know what the shrubbery was, but big heads of something. I don't know what you call them. The word flowers, something. I don't know much about plants. Anyway. Pardon me? Sort of, I guess. Here I am teaching my son about plants, everything about them. But I did say the deer like those. 6 months later, we were in another park. He deer here. I said, where? Both those bushes. Right? This is teleological. The bushes exist for a reason. They exist to feed the deer. Therefore, the bushes are here, there must be deer. And all children develop that automatically. It's innate. And it's only around age 9 or 10 it starts to wane. And yet we don't get over it completely. How many times have you heard people say, well, this must have happened for a reason? Or, I don't know why I was put here on earth. But there's a reason for it. That's teleological reason. We're born with it. We only get over this through reason, through challenge, through critical thinking. And we may never get rid of it completely. So, now this is really important, and this is something that people sometimes don't like to accept. In our brains, when we get new information, the default bias is that it is true. If I were to say, hey, yes, downstairs, Elvis Presley. Your brains, you may not believe it, but research shows this very clearly. For a millisecond, and then this course line is dead. The critical thinking part comes a split second later. And this was a big discovery because what it shows is that if you interrupt the process of questioning, or some people don't question, there'll be situations where it's very easy for them to accept something as true without even giving it a second thought. So belief comes first. Doubt is learned later. Children acquire doubt, the ability to doubt, much later than they acquire the ability to believe. And so it, as I say, is one of the last cognitive functions to develop. Okay, so let me come back then to when beliefs apply, having given you a little bit of an introduction to beliefs. Samuel Johnson, back in the 1700s, wrote, "Every man who attacks my belief diminishes in some degree my confidence in it, and therefore makes me uneasy. And I'm angry with him who makes me uneasy." Well, we can probably all feel a little bit of that at times. You know, you love Donald Trump, and your neighbor says, "The guy's an idiot." How do you feel? And if you really love Donald Trump, you're not going to feel too good about that kind of attack. Well, we can take some more mundane things that would probably be better examples. So let me go back here. So all of these things I talked about at the beginning, these don't have anything with facts. Well, there may be some facts there, some sources, but most important, the belief has an emotional impact on these people. They don't want to give it up. And so tackling them with facts, saying that, look, this therapy at the Hippocrates Center is useless, isn't going to have any impact because they will reject you other things. Right? So how do we deal with it? So presenting facts is enough. Citing experts is not effective. You got your experts and my experts. The Bible tells me so. Right? So who are you going to tell me? So we can't just go and say, I know better than you do. Because if we say that, then again, we're just setting up emotional interactions. Another voice from the past here, Jonathan Swift, reasoning will never make a man correct an ill opinion, which by reasoning he never acquired. So, one way of thinking about challenging people who have beliefs, important beliefs that confront yours, that collide with yours, is what would it take for you to choose, to change an important belief? I mean, suppose someone tried to persuade you that you don't need food to live on. Would you even bother paying attention to the breatharian? Probably not. Violate the belief. So you're nuts. I'm not going to listen. What if someone argued that oregano can cure cancer? Or that pedophilia is harmless? Would you even want to talk to that person? Or this is my favorite, that cannibalism just good recycling. Well, by realizing that we wouldn't even look at their evidence. It tells us a little bit about how those people with beliefs very disparate to our own are likely to react to us. And we should understand that it's not a matter of logic and debate when we're dealing with these confrontational belief systems. So what can we do? Well, again, looking at the psychological literature, there's no easy way. very often you won't be successful at all. But there are some guidelines that people have come up with. So one is think about what's called latitude of rejection. That means if you choose an argument that the person's going to reject outright, you've lost. So if you're dealing with someone who swears by homeopathy, and you start out with all homeopaths are quacks, you've lost right off the bat. That is not something that we can consider. So you've got to think about what kinds of things might they at least consider that don't reject outright. Which leads to the notion of oh, by the way, I want to mention this passage. Psychologists have found that sometimes in those kinds of confrontation, when you challenge someone too strongly, and you're saying things that they will reject out of hand, there's actually a backfire effect. You actually strengthen their belief. And it's not because they're trying to make it so new. Research shows this is kind of a natural reaction of trying to defend a belief that they become more invested in. So we have to be careful of not triggering that. But what we can do is look for a wedge issue. The names, I mentioned these cards on the people who suggested these things. So we try to find an alternate framework that won't trigger that rejection. For example, if you have someone who's going to a psychic for financial advice, some people do. Again, if you say all psychics are frauds, forget it, you're not going to be listened to. You say, well, that's interesting, but I've heard that there are some fraudulent skeptics out there. Most people who believe in skeptics would say, you're right. So now you've got a wedge issue. You say, well, I wonder how you can tell us someone's approach. And so now this person might start to think, well, I don't know. You have a much better chance of making inroads. They're tackling their belief about this particular psychic or psychics in general by finding this wedge issue. So counter-explanation works in certain circumstances. This involves getting a person to imagine all the arguments that would support the opposite belief. Now, in most one-on-one confrontations, you can't do that. If you're teaching a high school class, maybe you can. But sometimes, even with friends, if you have a good relationship, you can say to them, well, I believe global warming. What arguments would support my position? It may help, there's no guarantee. But it's a clue to what might work. Stefan Lewandowski points out that we have to avoid, in discussions about these incompatible beliefs, we have to avoid repeating what's false. Right? If you're saying to someone, breatharian, talking to breatharian, people, it's absolutely crazy to think you can live on air. He points out, again, going back to some things I mentioned earlier, you keep saying you can breathe on air. That may be what people remember, rather than the fact that you said it doesn't work, it's crazy. So what you want to do is talk about the positives. Look, people need food to eat. Say that over and over. That is more likely to succeed in the person's memory. Now again, this is going to be a minor victory. This is not a pathway to changing incompatible beliefs. These are just different ways of looking at it to have a little bit of an extra chance of getting somewhere. So you focus on telling what's true. And most important, I think, is this notion of planning.